My initial years that I started the company, I used to always think that my company is like my child. Over the years, I realized if you have a child, you never sort of part with your child, right? You never sell your child. You never do a strategic investment in your child. But every founder should think that your company is like your first house, okay? You have a lot of emotions, you have a lot of memories, you put your blood and soul to get to that house, okay? And you never want to sell it, okay, ever. You never build how to sell it. But at a certain point of time in your life and for a certain reason, you will sell your first house also.
Hello, everyone. Hello, founders, and welcome to SaaSBoomi's Founders Deep Dive. As you guys know, we are doing multiple podcast series, and this show actually is called as the Founders Deep Dive. So this season 2, we are trying to do a slightly different format or a structure. In season 1, we have generally went broader story about the founder and sort of covered more breadth rather than depth of any particular topic. From season 2 onwards, we've taken a slightly different approach where we are trying to take 2 or maximum 3 topics and go deeper into those topics. And with that background, I want to welcome Aditya Tulsian in season 2's this episode 2. Thank you, Aditya. He was a founder for a company called Numberz, which got later acquired by Chargebee. And he's now part of Chargebee as a general manager for receivables division. And without further ado, I want Aditya to give a quick background intro about himself, and then we'll get straight into the show.
Cool. Thank you, Suresh. Thanking me. Thanks for having me for part of this show. Really excited. I've gone through a lot of the stuff that you guys have done. And when I just wear a founder's hat, I've really found those content amazing, and the stories that you guys have brought I hope these stories were there when I started off.
Actually, at least, when you started off, there is a community, but stories was missing. When I started, there was no community only.
Yeah, I know. We can almost have this thing we call the founder's journey. We can call it the ecosystem's journey. And how each new founder, when he joins the ecosystem, has a different experience. But thanks for having me. As a quick introduction, like a typical Marwadi from Calcutta, the moment you're born, your destiny has always been written. You either are supposed to be a chartered accountant or you're supposed to be a trader. And my entire family was chartered accountant. And I thought, no, I don't want to have the conversations on stock market, accounting, and stuff like that. So I'm going to become an engineer. So I did my electronics engineering from Pune. And quickly I realized that, though I love technology, I still like a bit of the business side of it. So I did my MBA from ISB Hyderabad. Then I joined a global consulting firm, worked across the globe. After a couple of years, I was just thinking about, is this the right time for me to get started? And at that point of time, one of my alums introduced me to a company called Intuit. Intuit, as you know, is one of the world's leading accounting and tax software provider. And they were just starting off their business in India and Asia. And they made me an offer to come and be part of the team that was setting up the entire business in this region. So it almost felt like you're getting paid to be in a startup. Okay. So I joined Intuit, and it was a great journey. I launched a number of products in India and learned a lot, had a few scars, and eventually launched QuickBooks in India. It was acquired almost like 20,000 small businesses in India. But while I was doing that, I used to always feel, the more I used to talk to customers, okay, the small businesses, I realized no one woke up in the morning to think about accounting, right? No founder would say, oh, my biggest problem in my company or in my life is accounting. Okay. But they would wake up in the morning to say, you know what, I have a cash flow problem. I need more money to do X, to do Y, or just to keep my company alive. And the more I started hearing that, I realized there's a huge opportunity to think about helping businesses manage their cash flow, especially if there's an opportunity to marry software, okay, with actual financial services. It can actually create a huge opportunity. So with that, sort of in 2016, with a couple of my team members from Intuit itself, okay, we launched Numberz with the whole mission of enabling businesses, okay, to continue to grow without ever worrying about their cash flow. So that was how we started Numberz, initially focusing on small business in India, and then sort of pivoting to large corporates in India, and then our last kind of expansion was going global. When eventually, of course, we partnered with Chargebee, and now we are together. So that's kind of my introduction on where I started from and where I am today.
So, yeah, I think that intro was fantastic, and that's much needed for the audience to get a big background. As I started out this particular episode, we want to go deep into a couple of topics rather than going all over the place. One is essentially trying to understand, you've done a lot of work in ICP area in your Numberz journey. And one of the other topics that I want to touch about is actually your acquisition journey with Chargebee. Eventually, for most of the funded startups, either they have to go IPO or they have to do an exit. So that exit is like, this is one of those important topics everybody needs to understand. So we're going to focus and concentrate on these two areas, right?
Perfect.
So let's get started with ICP, right? If you trace back either the success or the failure or the struggles of any startup, if you ask, like they say, if you ask 5 why, you go to the root cause. And if you ask the same 5 whys, it will go back to a clear definition of ICP if it is a successful startup, or very vague and confusing definition of ICP when it becomes a startup that's going through a struggle or challenge. So that's really how I generally think about the importance of ICP, which is the ideal customer profile. So tell us about your own journey on ICP and how did you define when you start a company? That's the very first thing that somebody has to decide. I also want to touch base on this topic a little bit more detail. Does the problem come first or the person come first? In ICP, where is the real starting point?
Got it. Oh, well, I think that's a very, very interesting question to start with. Okay, the way you framed it. In my journey, both at Intuit, then at Numberz, and even some of the work I'm doing at Chargebee now, the Uber level problem always comes first. So as an example, we started by saying that we want to solve a cash flow problem, okay, for the small businesses. So the fact that there's a cash flow problem is kind of some of your insights into the segment, into the industry, tells you that this is a problem that really exists. That problem also gives you a kind of a broad ICP. So as an example, I said cash flow problem across small businesses in India. So by definition, I've already started defining a bit of my ICP, but that's a good way to start. But when you start thinking about you want to build a business and for that you want to build a product, right? The same large segment has to actually be brought, to really a smaller subsegment, okay? And a lot of my learnings have come from Scott Cook, okay, who was a founder at Intuit. And he used to always use this whole framework called go broad to go narrow, right? So, the definition is it was broad enough definition to start with. So the initial period, you do an experiment. You may experiment with, say, a small business, which is also a trader, a small business that's a manufacturer, a small business that's in services, a small business that's in import-export. So you start experimenting across all these 4 or 5 segments that you think about. And as you move forward and as you get more and more learning, you try to narrow it down to say, it's Indian small businesses, but who are into trading, who have a high rotation of working capital. So they have a problem that's much bigger than let's say services company, because services company, the profitability is high. They don't really always suffer for working capital. They have some other challenges that you go for. So a trader requires a working capital on an ongoing basis just to keep the lights on.
Yeah. Hey, actually, since you mentioned about Scott Cook, some 5-6 years ago, Scott Cook actually came to Bangalore. Maybe like 10 years ago. I don't know exactly. And I was there. I actually met him in person.
Oh, really?
I was there in that event. Any chance you were also at Intuit at the time?
Yeah. So no, I wasn't at Intuit at that point of time. I had just quit Intuit. And I think in my first year or the second year of my startup.
Oh,
and
really?
So then I had sort of got to him and said, I want to meet you now that I'm an entrepreneur. But at that point I had just quit.
Oh, really? So maybe we missed each other in that event.
Yeah. And I still remember that. I think that was almost his last visit to India.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think he came after that.
No, after that he hasn't come.
Yeah. So coming back to the ICP thing, I think there are two different points I was reflecting on as you were talking. One is, especially in a startup journey, a founder has a skill set, and the skill sets leads him to a broader problem. And then it narrows down to the persona, which has
Yes.
can we say something like that? For example, when I started Kissflow, I had a broader skill set around rule engines, rule-based computing.
Right.
And then I said, you know what? How do I allow rule engines as a way to build applications for non-technical users? So, because I have a skill set, that skill set allows me.
Yes.
The skill set could be technical. It sometimes could be domain knowledge. For example, I'm like a financial professional. I know, like, let's say, wealth management or something like that. Then I'm trying to say, hey, how do I solve wealth management problem for somebody, right? Typically, here I also want to introduce the nuance of B2B versus B2C. Like, for example, in a B2C scenarios, rarely domain knowledge comes first, right? Because you really don't need domain knowledge, because a lot of people without domain knowledge from college dorm rooms, they are starting companies in B2C, right? Because college students are starting startups in B2C, which means that they don't need domain knowledge. There, the problem and ICP comes more accurately first. But when it comes to B2B, it seems like the founder's background and the domain knowledge naturally leads to a broader problem that they wanted to solve. From there, they are trying to narrow down to the ideal customer profile. Is this a better way to think about it, or what is your views on this? I'm just trying to purposefully.
No, I think you're right, because even when you think about the broad problem. So again, just to take the example that I gave, I don't think, let's say hypothetically, a marketing expert will not wake up in the morning and say, oh, I want to solve the cash flow problem. They may wake up and say that, with all my experience, I know that people are not able to target their customers better, or businesses are not able to target their customers better.
Or they are not. SEO is an important thing. Everybody is missing it. I want to solve that SEO.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, that insight can either come from experience. For example, a lot of B2C startups, okay, they would have some experience. They would have say, oh, this is a very shitty way to get delivery, okay, for my food in the night. Okay, so therefore I want to change that. Okay, or they would say, like Facebook, there has to be a better way to find smarter people on the campus, right? So that's an experience that they are having, right? And similarly, that experience in a B2B scenario comes in from the expertise that I understand this space pretty much well. And therefore, within that space, I think this is a problem statement, which is in their sort of worldview, it's a big enough problem, right? So it comes from either experience or insight. But both of them will always come with some ICP in mind. So example, if you say Facebook, he pretty much started by saying that it is largely a university level problem. Okay. Yeah. He didn't say that I want to go. Yeah. Okay. So therefore that broad definition of ICP is already there with him. The problem always comes with a kind of a broad ICP. And then, smart founders are able to really narrow it down to say, within this broad ICP, this is the segment that I think I can get people to adopt more or use more, or this is a bigger problem.
For the audience, I just wanted to clarify how I'm trying to drive this conversation. First, I wanted to get some base concepts right in everybody's. Yeah. And then the second part of this ICP conversation, I wanted to go deeper into how you translated these ideas or conceptual understanding of these ICP problems into Numberz journey. Right. And that way people can sort of roughly match the theory with the practical stuff, right? So that's where I'm heading with this. So one more question around this in terms of the theoretical understanding is, a lot of people tend to confuse customer segment with ICP. Why don't you talk to me related to how is customer segment interplay with ICP? Like, is it same or is it different? Or for example, I mentor a lot of startups in Tamil Nadu especially. Outside of SaaS companies, anyway, SaaS companies, we're doing it part of SaaSBoomi, but out of SaaS companies, I do a lot of startups in the tier 2, tier 3 area. I call them and say, hey, what is your ideal customer profile? They'll say, for me, SMB is my ideal customer. That is more like a segment or based on size of the company, not an ideal customer profile.
So I'll also go on this one before I answer this question, right? When you call ICP, there are also different levels of ICP. Okay. As an example, one level ICP could just be which type of organization is the perfect customer for you. And then the next level ICP would be within the organization, who's the real buyer, who's really going to take the decision, make the payment, and actually even use it, right? So it actually goes, as you keep thinking about the ICP, you keep going, at multiple layers to really be able to have clarity on what an ICP is. But your point is correct. A segment is always slightly broader. SMB, as I said, SMB as a segment is broad. Okay. Then within the segment, you can say sub-segment to say within SMB, it could be traders. Okay. Within traders, I could further come down and say that those traders who I'm taking a bit of reference of my experience at Numberz. Okay. But within those traders are those businesses which have to rotate every 7 days to 15 days. And within that, I could also think about the type of trader could be a commodity trader, okay, or that of trader could be someone who's doing to manufacturing add-ons. So this level of understanding comes from at a firmographic level to say this is the definition of the firm which would want to buy my product. And then the next level of detailing comes to say, even if I'm able to get to the firm, who's the actual buyer? And I always take this definition and, more from a B2C perspective is, especially in our Indian households, when you go and buy a broom, the person who's going to pay for the broom and the person who may use the broom may be two very different people. When you buy a child's toy, the person who's buying the child's toy, will be the person who's going to, get excited to get the toy, are two very different people. Similarly, in a B2B scenario, the founder owner may be the decision maker, but the influence and the user may be very different. Okay. Yeah. So again, you have to be very clear. What is the definition? Which type of founder or promoter has this problem? And what type of user/influencer you have to deal with? Okay. If you don't understand these aspects as well, then it starts impacting your sales journey and your marketing journey. So it's almost like the way you think of any business thinks about the funnel in terms of their conversions. You can almost think about your ICP in terms of every layer you have to start thinking and discovering as you go forward.
It's a very interesting point. You sort of got ahead of my next question, which I wanted to say. The word customer sometimes is misleading because there are three. We think customer as one person or sometimes a type of organization, but customer is like three people. Like the buyer, is called the economic buyer, right? Who's going to pay money for your product and he's trying to get some economic benefits out of that payment he's making.
Yes.
So that is the first one. And then the second one is the user. Let's say a parent buys like a baby food. The user is the child.
Yes.
The mother is going to be the buyer. And if the baby food is not going to taste good, baby is going to spit it out. And the mother will not buy it next time. So the person who's using the product also needs to like the product. And then there is the third person, which is like the influencer, right? Here it could be like a pediatrician doctor or sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And sometimes even the mother-in-laws.
No, absolutely. That actually in Indian household, it could be so many of them, but you're right.
So many of them. So I'm taking this baby food example because it's very easy to relate to.
Yes, completely.
One of the things I realized is, if I trace back BYJU'S example of why it sort of failed, went through a lot of challenges in the recent 1 year, is that they got their focus on ICP, they overly focused on the buyer and sold vision for them, and they completely missed the user. User is the kids. They didn't have stickiness with the product. So after 18 months, when the renewal cycle came for BYJU'S, and the parents figured out that their kids are actually not using.
Yes.
And the trickle effect of that renewal cycle spread so fast, the word of mouth, right? And it just sort of pushed the company to the ground. And also they antagonized the influencers, which is in this case, the school teachers. They went against
Yes.
school teachers, the tuition centers, the coaching academies. So they just completely missed the other two people in the ICP.
Yes.
They just focused just on the parent and then sold them your son is going to be like an IAS officer, or they're going to clear IIT, or they're going to and they bought that vision. And when they ignore the user and the influencer, it can actually destroy a whole company, right? That's a classic example. In addition to other financial issues, see, most of the time when the company is successful, none of the other issues, it comes highlighted. Like people highlight the financial issues or mismanagement or all these things when the company is not successful. If the company is successful, somehow people want to sort of bury all of that. And then, so I think the root cause of the problem is the company did not succeed, and that I can trace it back to ICP.
You're bang on. Every experience that we've had, okay, whether across last 10 plus years that I've been in this space, I can tell you it's all boils down to understanding the customer, okay, and both in terms of who will buy, who will use, but more importantly, why are they using it? And in the end, sometimes they do purchase. You may get the reason right, you may get the problem right, you may get the purchase right, you may get the whole funnel right, but you also have to start figuring out for that ICP, is the benefit being delivered on an ongoing basis?
Yeah.
Right.
Actually, since you are in numbers and you talked about accounting, I don't want to underestimate the power of the influencers, because the example of Tally, one of how they were able to use influencers, in this case, chartered accountants, and get massive monopoly in India.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, all these three roles, if you correctly in ICP, like the buyer, the user, and the influencer, Tally is a great example of how they leverage the influencer and got it that penetration, right? Like to the extent that, the Intuit went back out of India market because probably, I don't know, they were not able to compete in that SMB segment, right? I think Tally is still the leader in that SMB segment maybe. But nevertheless, these three are so important. I think often misunderstood. Now that we got some of these basics right, it will be good to understand from numbers perspective, how did you go about this ICP? What was your initial ICP? And also let's talk with the initial ICP, because ICP is also something that keeps evolving as the company grows, right? It's not like a cast in stone kind of thing.
One thing we always wanted to answer for ourselves is, we would never stop at the level to say, do you have a problem? We would actually try to figure out, why does that problem exist for those kind of businesses? And if we are able to understand that problem, then we knew that our solution could solve the root cause of the problem and just not the symptom. So we quickly realized in the initial 9 to 12 month journey, okay, was that the trading community and the services community, which had a certain volume of invoices that we were creating every month, had a cash flow problem. So our initial firmographics were the trading segments, the services segment, the volume of invoices, and also the value of invoices that we created. So these are 4-5 parameters that we quickly came up to say, if these parameters are being met, okay, the person she's most probably going to use a platform. So once we got that right, so that was the first 9 to 12 month journey. The second journey really start becoming to say, fine, within these two segments as well, why do these problems really exist? Is it a problem because their own internal processes are not able to keep up with some of the work that's happening? Is it a customer-related problem, okay, that's going on, that the customer just their customers don't pay them on time at all, and therefore no software can really solve it, or is something else that's happening? So again, you quickly start figuring out, if once you understand some of the root causes for these segments, the question then you have to ask yourself is your solution, whether it's the software, whether it's something else, can solve the problem or not? At least initially, when we realized that some of the segments actually have a the buyer behavior problem or the way some of the practices are in the ecosystem, a software cannot change that. So even if the problem is big, and even if that particular sort of business segment is adopting a platform, eventually we won't be able to solve it very well. Okay, the wow factor or the benefit won't be delivered beyond a point. But we realized that there were certain segments where the late payments, okay, that were really coming in were largely because of the business's internal issues and less to do with their buyer. So that could have been solved by software or any other tool. So we started now going deeper into that segment. Okay, rather than go after a segment which was paying us decently well, was actually, especially in the Indian community, trading is a huge segment. We actually stopped trying to deal with those trading segments. We started only going after, companies which also had a service component to it and had a high volume of invoices. And we could understand that the reason that the deals were happening were more internal rather than just the way the industry was. So that was also one journey that we went through, where we kept honing in and going deeper into a segment. And now, instead of just focusing on the overall firmographic details, we started focusing on why does a problem exist. So I've just shared this with you just to tell you, understand, even in the ICP journey that we had, we kept improving or kept learning at every stage. What are the aspects of our ICP definition we should think about, so that, at a certain point of time, we know the segment that has a problem will adopt a solution and see the benefit, and therefore will keep renewing the software.
I wanted to provide a quick summary of this particular topic for the audience by giving an example. And if you can also repeat it for numbers, it will be useful. For example, if you take for Kissflow, we are defining our ICP as companies that are $500 million and above revenue in the enterprise segment, irrespective of industry verticals, and they have a digital transformation function, and there is a transformation owner. So he is our economic buyer. This is the company, this is the economic buyer. Okay, and the user is process experts in their team. There will be like an expert who is actually a process in the particular team. They're the user. So the buyer is the digital transformation, this one. And then the influencer is actually IT team, because they have to vet the technology. So we define our ICP as this customer segment, this size, and he's the buyer, he's the user, and he's the influencer. That is the clarity that most companies in the startups needs to have. And what would be that for Numberz?
Yeah. So for the first segment of our journey, okay, our definition was companies that were, anywhere between, let's say, 5 crores in revenue to right up to 50, 60 crores in revenue. That was a segment. They usually would have the total number of buyers for them, okay, would be anywhere between 100 to 1,000. Okay, their invoice value would be, anywhere between even 100 rupees to right up to a few lakhs, not more than that. Okay, of an average value of the invoices. Okay, and most of them would be on a tally in terms of their accounting solution, and of course there would be a owner. Okay, but they would also have a full-time financial executive, okay, who's handling this entire sort of process internally. And there's some other details. For example, we would check with, are they GST registered, on a few other things, just to make sure that they were falling into the formal ecosystem that we had to deal with. We also knew that these guys would also have an external CA. Okay, because companies with these kind of sizes won't have a full-time, chartered accountant who would do it. So we knew that person would be the influencer. Financial executive would be someone who's not a CA, okay, but would have tried a CA and been there sometime for a few years. We would actually also see, though this would not come at the starting of the journey in the sense when we're going to pitch to them, but we would always try to figure out what is the growth rate of the company. Okay, how have they grown? we would sort of ask them a few questions to figure out, has the company been growing over the last couple of years? Because that will also give us a mindset of the buyer, of the owner of the company. Because that actually used to define the probability of the sale closing within a short time. Okay.
I was actually getting there. Okay, go ahead. That was my next question.
So a lot of these cues we would actually ask. So some definitions used to be, it's almost like hygiene definitions to say, okay, this between this firmographic details and the other details of the customer, we know that they are the right entity to buy the software. And then there would be the psychographic analysis that we used to do to say, what is the probability of the sale closing or the adoption happening? Sometimes things like, and when we had some of our best sales guys used to actually do these few tricks. They would sort of ask them, what is the growth rate? They would also ask them, sort of casually, what other softwares do you use in the company? And and a bit more definition of, do they have any big buyers that they sell to? Because that also forces people to get a bit more formalized in the processes. So these couple of questions used to start telling us the probability of this sale closing.
As you guys can clearly understand how elaborate this ICP definition is, right? So there's so much amount of work that goes in defining this ICP, because the repercussions of incorrect ICP is massive. If you don't have a correct ICP, what will the marketing team do? Who will they target? They will be targeting the wrong people, right? So talk about experiences of incorrect or very loosely defined ICP and the effect of marketing and go-to-market in Numberz.
Before you do that, I'll give you a very classic example that actually I learned, and that has become my sort of go-to example whenever I speak about ICP to my team or even externally. I'm sure a lot of you guys would know that there's a company called Box, okay, and there's a company called Dropbox. Now, both these companies, okay, are pretty much in the same space. Both the founders are phenomenal, right? So if you do any psychometric analysis to say both are aggressive, both are growing, everything else is great, both are in the same segment, both of them are pretty large, successful companies. So when we used to start thinking about these two companies, and we used to say which of these two companies would be the best sort of buyer of any cash flow based system, okay, cash flow management platform, especially on a receivables perspective, what you would realize is while a lot of the ICP definitions would meet both of them, but the way they run their businesses is very, very different. And that comes, I think you just elaborate at that smart level, that they both sell to two different types of businesses itself. Box sells to enterprises, Dropbox sells to the freemium, SMB kind of space. And because of that, the type of cash flow processes they need to follow are very, very different. So the problem they face is very, very different. So now if you are a cash flow management software or a receivable software, okay, or whatever other piece solves in this journey, the type of solution they both require is very, very, very different. So therefore, externally, they would have met all my ICP requirements. But till the time you don't understand the second level of details to say what is their real business and who they sell to, okay, and therefore what the processes are, the type of solution you'll provide them is very, very different. So going back to your point on marketing, right? Even when you go out and give your ICP definitions to marketing, I actually think the product team plays a very, very critical role in trying to help the marketing team understand that when you are going out and you're trying to target a customer, sometimes you have data sets. As an example, again, I'm just going to take Box and Dropbox as an example because it's so easy for a lot of people to relate to. You would have a lot of external data to be able to target both of these companies. Okay, but you won't have enough data to figure out, which problem do either of them have. And therefore, the product team then has to then work with the marketing team to say, there's a way that you can target both of them, but these are the additional marketing statements you need to add so that if either of them read it, okay, they know this is for them rather than just a generic one. So to your point around ICP, the marketing team and the product team actually have to work very, very close together to help understand, number one, what all external data is available for you to target them. Okay. And the second is if you don't have additional data to target them, what are some of the marketing messaging that you have to put in so that when your ICP reads it, they know that this is their problem and not someone else's problem.
Absolutely. The reason why I asked about the impact of marketing was also to articulate, like, for example, somebody says, I'm making a bike, right? Like a two-wheeler. And now you want to reach to the market, then they'll be thinking very broadly, hey, I have to go and put an advertisement in TV and newspaper and stuff like that. And then you start working out the budget, it comes to a bomb.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, if they ask the question, hey, what kind of a bike is this? Who is the buyer? Who am I doing it? It might well be like you are not doing a two-wheeler, but you're actually making a scooty, which is for a woman of age group 25 to 35 or 20 to 30, who you can easily find in front of maybe women's colleges, right? Then the notion of go-to-market reach out, marketing reach out, suddenly boils down to simply putting hoardings in front of colleges rather than taking advertisement on televisions, which is going to run into crores and this is going to run into lakhs. So you are basically crunched it by 100x. So the more narrower the ICP definition is, the more cost effective, and you don't have to boil the ocean to reach to your market. Otherwise, the more broader it is, the more unstructured it is, the more expensive it's going to be to do go-to-market and to do campaigns or to do lead gen. Everywhere it has an implication because the entire company's product strategy, go-to-market strategy, sales strategy, customer support, everything depends on ICP.
And on the ICP. Absolutely. In fact, I'll just add to this one. Okay. And this actually also happened with us, but I'll tell that story a bit later. Is the way you just do the example that I want to start off as a bike company. And, I can create a Harley Davidson or I can create a scooty. Or, you know what, I can also just create an e-bike, right? And for each one of them, the amount of product investment is going to be very, very different. If you are able to get the ICP right, and sometimes this also goes back to that ICP is a journey, you might just start by saying, without having to invest, millions of dollars in trying to create a Harley Davidson kind of a bike, I may actually start with the e-bike, okay, which is very simple to make. I can quickly launch it to young women who are still in college, who are in urban cities, okay, or tier 2 cities, and quickly get them to adopt the bike. And it's the fastest way to grow the business. And then I can evolve to, let's say, make a Harley Davidson for women.
When you say I'm making a bike, it is too vague.
Yes.
But if you say I'm making Harley Davidson versus I'm making an electric scooter, it's more clear. So ICP is about clarity rather than whether it is easy.
I completely agree. And the clarity comes across all your business processes then. Okay, as you said, it comes in your product development, it comes in your marketing, it comes in your sales, customer support, everything. What I think anyone who's starting off, we keep saying that the leader's job is actually to make sure that all the resources are actually being aligned to a single direction. And for that, okay, one of the most important pieces of the strategy is actually the ICP. So that every part of your company, every resource is focused only on a very targeted group problem solution. Okay, because no matter, even if you start with a $100 million as seed fund, as a seed round, right? It's always a limited amount of capital. You need to focus all of it into a very small problem and solve it really well. ICP is the center of this entire strategy.
Exactly. Okay. I think with that, it's good time for us to switch to the second topic. So tell us about, I know you ran it for 6 years or so before getting acquired by Chargebee, and you're already like close to 3 years in Chargebee, right? I think I always think like founders, after they're getting acquired, after like a year or so, they end up anyway leaving. The fact that you are there for 3 years or so also says something good about this whole acquisition that has happened, right? And it tells about the synergy and the mutual respect and the space that is available and everything, right? So tell us about how it happened, because acquisition is not an easy thing. So tell us about that journey. And
so just to give you background, when I was at Intuit, okay, I was also very deeply involved in acquiring an Indian company, integrating within Intuit. So I was on that side of the table as well, and now I was on the other side of the table. So I'll just give you 3 or 4 top insights that I got. My first insight has always been that in most cases, in most successful M&As that happen, right, it's not really that two people wake up in the morning and say, let's do this deal. Okay. Or an iBanker just comes in and says, Miss X, meet Miss Y, and let's do a deal. It never happens like that. Okay. It's always a relationship that happens. I and Krish actually first met nearly in, I think 2018 or 2019. Okay. Early 2019, where I had gone to him in his office to ask him about some advice on some of the decisions that we were taking at the company. And he had called me over to his office for lunch, and he also made me meet his team at that point of time, so that I could sort of learn about what to do about it. And we were trying to go global at that point of time, and that's how the journey started. And then it culminated into a level where we started getting a common customer. So one of the biggest customers was Freshworks, and Freshworks was becoming one of our biggest customers. And we both had to work together to ensure that the solution was creating value for Freshworks. So both the teams also worked very closely in getting this thing going. And then that led to a conversation to say, hey, can we try this with some of our other customers that we have? So then Chargebee's teams introduced us to some of the other global customers, and we're testing out whether they can use our product and stuff like that. So this was actually a journey of more than 18 months where the two teams were directly, indirectly working, okay, and trying to understand whether their customer base was using our product, and was their customer base relevant for our product and stuff like that. So it was actually an 18-month journey. And then, of course, in 2021, the ecosystem, was going through its own sort of exuberance. A lot of things happened, okay, and one thing led to another, and we actually got a few other conversations going. And then I just went to Krish and I said, Krish, we've always spoken about working together. We may have to take a call, okay? So would you also be interested? And he just said, just give me some time. And within a few days, he just turned things around, and he just came back and said, let's get this going. And and then the rest is history. So the journey was actually, if you really ask me, it was 18 months, and there was no iBanker, there's no one involved. It was just me picking up the phone, calling up Krish to say, something is happening at our end. You've already spoken about it. Would you want to do it? So it's actually it's a relationship, than just a transaction that took place. So my first insight is, any kind of successful strategic partnership happens because you've nurtured a journey over a period of time. Okay, so that's one, which I think is also for founders to say, if at any given point of time you think that M&A or acquisition is a potential exit for you, okay, please remember that you have to work on this for a long time before that's ever going to happen. It's not a get an iBanker and get it done. It's not the way it should be done at all. It's actually a huge amount of trust that needs to be built at both ends.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask one question here. See, when you and Krish are talking, founders, I generally think one of the things that founders have, which I think a typical management team doesn't really have, is that a founder is able to work on one part of the brain, an M&A conversation with Krish. And without that conversation impacting The other part of the brain continues to work on product strategy, roadmap, go to market, marketing, what is the next quarter's milestone. These two tracks are able to co-live in the same mind without affecting the performance of one another.
Yes.
Right? It's a very, very tough thing. And founders do it like somewhat naturally. Good founders, like they do it very naturally. They know how to keep these two things compartmentalized and still be able to do it. But beyond a point, you might have to involve some of your team.
Yes.
And once you involve some of your team, then they're not founders, right? They're like management team, and they'll be thinking, hey, Aditya is talking about this acquisition with Chargebee, and I have this roadmap on my product, or we have this campaign that needs to happen, like big global campaign. I'm a marketing guy, a big global campaign. 3 months down the line, if we get acquired, why should we have to spend this money? Why do I need to work on this?
Yes.
So you got to, these are the challenges they go through.
Yes.
Right? And how do you manage this? And how long did you prolong this conversation before opening up to your team? Or do they know while it is still in the making? What if it didn't, like what would happen if it didn't happen? And then they'll say, what, it looks like at some point in time, Numberz will be anyway get sold. So how do I secure my own future? The jitteriness will come in. So how do you manage all these uncertainties?
Well, I can tell you, I give you first short and honest question. Sometimes, when you are on the battlefield, you don't think too much. You just keep going and you have to make it happen. But I think this is not only true for an M&A discussion. This is true even when you're about to raise a round.
Okay. No, about to raise a round is easy, because you are growing further. About to raise a round, there is not much, like everybody's excited about it. Like everybody's future is aligned, right? But exactly
why is it? To some extent, you have to, you as a management team have to now start thinking about it even at that point of time. Because when you go out and you, let's say, talk about, hey, this is a huge investment coming in, and that does not come through, that also creates a huge bump into the company, right? And then sort of that just spirals into, it can spiral into something.
There is a disappointment related
to that. So therefore, and therefore you always have to keep in mind to that every round, even though you're very excited about it, even at that point of time, you have to make sure that all the issues around funding are taken care of, but the business is still going on. So I think some of that experience, you start accumulating over those years. In the M&S case, I think some of it, that learning also helped me. A lot of the conversation, is one point that you made is at some level, I think it just comes naturally, or, you get used to it, is you're able to compartmentalize to some extent to say, these discussions are going on, but the business still has to go. Because one of the most important pieces that people have to keep in mind, is while this process is going on, of M&A or strategic discussion or strategic investment, whatever you may call it, if your business metrics dip, that's a huge red flag. So even if the strategic conversation is going in the right path, it's meeting all your milestones, everything else, but at any given point of time, if there's a dip in your business performance, that can actually derail the entire process. So that one point is very, very critical. So which all founders have to really think about throughout any of this process. Second is when you, at certain point of time, you have to start involving people into this conversation. What you have to do is you again use the pyramid principle. You just in the next stage after it's gone to next level, you involve only one or two people and explain them what's going on. What is the implication, etc. And answer all of their doubts that are coming in. So as an example, once I knew that this conversation has gone to a certain level and it's really moving forward and I need help now, I actually spent time with two of my next level leaders, both one-on-one and one-to-many, where I told them what's going on. I asked them what do you think, what you're thinking about it, what's your perspective, etc., etc. Because I had to make sure that first allay all their fears or doubts or questions that they may have. And then when they have to expose a few other people, we would do the same thing with the next stage. So one of the most important pieces is that you have to do a step-by-step kind of a process over here. And at each step, you have to understand that what are their fears, what are their questions, okay? Because if you don't answer them as much as you know, and you also have to be transparent, you have to tell them that I don't have these answers. A lot of people will ask the question around things like what is the org structure, okay, what's going to happen to our ESOPs, what's going to happen to this, what's going to happen to that, etc., etc. And honestly, you won't have majority of the answers. The answers will evolve as the process goes forward. So you have to be transparent. You have to be patient with them. You have to win them over, and then go one by one. And you also have to keep telling them that while all this is going on, the business cannot stop. In fact, I always say this: if it's possible at that moment, people should put in even more efforts to ensure that the business is not affected in any way fashion. If it means putting in more hours, if it means putting in sort of resources behind it, just to ensure that the diversion that it is causing does not impact the business in any way. At any given point of time, the best odds that you have for a deal of this getting done is 50-50. That's the best odds that you have. And the longer the process goes, the probability of the deal closing keeps going down, which means that there is all the probability of a disappointment is always higher than the probability of the exuberance. So hence, you have to get to a stage where if the deal does not happen, there should never be a point that you think, oh, even the business is not doing well and even the deal hasn't happened. That is going to kill the system immediately. So hence, you will always have to tell your next level and the next level that the business continuity and growth is paramount, irrespective of what happens to the sort of strategic conversation.
I think I'm going to stop right there because I think there are two important points you mentioned there. I think we hit the 1 hour mark. One is, irrespective, the 50 at any point in time, the best probability of an M&A or even a fundraise round is only 50-50, right? So it's just like 50, that's a big takeaway. I know why you said that. The second thing, what you're really also saying is that because there's only 50-50, you have to rather over-invest on growing the business rather than anything else, because it can only be better. So I think oftentimes when the M&A conversation happens, you get sidetracked and you sort of lose the focus on the core business. I think I have a lot of things to talk. You probably need another hour or so. I think it has been fantastic, Aditya, to talk very, very deep dive on ICP. It was wonderful talking to you. Any closing comments you wanted to say?
Yeah, there's only one sort of learning I would share with everyone, okay, whoever starting the company. My initial years that I started the company, I used to always think that my company is like my child. Over the years, I realized is, if you have a child, you never sort of part with your child, right? You never sell your child. You never do a strategic investment in your child. But every founder should think that your company is like your first house, okay? You have a lot of emotions. You have a lot of memories. You put your blood and soul to get to that house. But at a certain point of time in your life and for a certain reason, you will sell your first house also. So founders should think that their company is not the child, but their first house with all the emotions. And then you will be able to sort of better think about a lot of strategic outcomes in a very different way, rather than, always thinking that, well, I can never imagine a situation where I would say that I'm going to part with my child. But that actually thought process will actually help you take a lot better decisions strategically rather than just about how you grow the business.
Actually,
that's my one passing.
It's a very good analogy. Like, instead of thinking about it as a first child, you can think about it like your first house. You will be a little bit more dispassionate about this. It will still be emotional, but not as much as a child analogy, right? So
exactly.
Yeah, with that note, thank you very much. And I had a wonderful time talking to you. I hope
same here.
Audience also learn a lot through this podcast. Thank you very much, Aditya. Look forward to meeting you soon somewhere in an event. Okay?
Sure. Bye. Thanks, Suresh. Cheers. Bye.